The evening was like any other, quiet and uneventful. I sat at my desk, surrounded by the comforting hum of my modest apartment. Papers and blueprints cluttered the surface, a half-empty mug of coffee sitting precariously close to the edge. The city outside was alive with distant sounds of traffic and occasional laughter, but my world was still, wrapped in the solitude I had grown used to. I had long accepted this solitude as my norm. While the integration of alien life into Earth's fabric had been monumental, it hadn't changed much for me. The Seraphine, a humanoid race from a distant planet, were celebrated for their wisdom and advanced technologies, but their arrival felt like something for governments and scholars to handle. My life as an engineer felt far removed from intergalactic diplomacy. At least, that's what I thought. The soft chime of my apartment's doorbell broke through my focus. I glanced at the clock, 11:43 p.m. An odd time for visitors. Frowning, I stood and approached the door, my mind racing through possibilities. A neighbor in need? A package delivery mistake? Nothing prepared me for what I found when I opened the door. There she stood. The Seraphine were undeniably beautiful, their features both familiar and otherworldly. But this woman, no, this alien, was unlike anything I had ever seen. Her skin, pale with a faint silver hue, seemed to shimmer under the dim hallway lights. Her hair cascaded like molten platinum, catching and refracting the faint glow of the apartment corridor. And her eyes, deep, vibrant violet, held a depth that seemed to pierce straight through me. "I apologize for disturbing you at this hour," she said, her voice melodic and soft, with an accent that carried a lilting cadence. "But I need a place to stay. Just for tonight." Her words took a moment to register. I blinked, unsure if I had heard her correctly. "Sorry, what?" She clasped her hands in front of her, the gesture both human-like and strangely elegant. "I mean no harm. I am Nyari of the Seraphine. My quarters are far, and I find myself displaced tonight. May I stay here?" Her request was as baffling as her sudden appearance. A Seraphine asking to stay with me? I stood in stunned silence, trying to process the situation. My initial reaction was caution. After all, who shows up at a stranger's door in the dead of night? Yet, there was something in her eyes, a flicker of vulnerability that disarmed me. "I suppose so," I found myself saying, stepping aside to let her in. "It's not much, but you're welcome to stay." She smiled, a small, grateful curve of her lips that lit up her already radiant face. "Thank you. You are kind." As she stepped into my apartment, I couldn't help but notice the faint shimmer that trailed behind her, almost like the remnants of a starlit mist. It wasn't an effect I had seen in any Seraphine on the news or in documentaries. Then again, I'd never been this close to one before. Closing the door, I turned to find her standing in the center of my living room, her gaze sweeping across the room. "It is cozy," she said, tilting her head slightly. "Is this how most humans live?" I scratched the back of my neck, suddenly self-conscious. The apartment wasn't much. Simple furniture, a few shelves lined with books, and a collection of scattered personal projects. It's not exactly representative of all humans. Just me. Her eyes lingered on a small, handcrafted mechanical model on a nearby shelf. "Did you make this?" I nodded, surprised by her interest. "Yeah. It's just a hobby. I like building things." She turned to me, her expression softening. "You create for the sake of creating. That is rare among my kind." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I gestured toward the couch. "You can sit if you'd like. Can I get you anything? Water? Something to eat?" Her smile returned, and she shook her head. "No, but thank you." An awkward silence followed as she sat gracefully on the couch, her movements almost ethereal. I perched on the armchair opposite her, my mind racing with questions. Why was she here? Why had she chosen my apartment? But before I could voice them, she spoke. "I should explain," she said, her tone apologetic. "It is unorthodox for a Seraphine to request hospitality in this way. But I have watched you. Watched me." The words came out sharper than I intended, and I immediately regretted it. "I mean, what do you mean by that?" Her hands fidgeted, a distinctly human gesture that caught me off guard. "Not in a harmful way," she said quickly. I live nearby. I have seen you in the market, in the square. You are different. Gentle. The word lingered in the air, and I wasn't sure how to feel about it. I'm just normal, I said, shrugging. Nothing special. Her gaze met mine, and for a moment, it felt as though the room had fallen away, leaving only the two of us. You are more than you realize, she said softly. Humans often are. Her words sent a strange warmth through me, and I found myself smiling despite the surreal nature of the situation. Well, I'm glad you think so. We fell into a more comfortable silence, and I leaned back, finally allowing myself to relax. Yet, as the quiet stretched, she turned to me again, her expression serious. Can I ask one more thing? She said, her voice almost hesitant. Of course. She hesitated, her violet eyes searching mine. Can I sleep next to you tonight, human? The question hit me like a tidal wave, leaving me momentarily speechless. You want to sleep here? Next to me? It is customary among my kind to seek closeness when we feel displaced, she explained. Your kind calls it intimacy? I do not mean to cause discomfort. My brain scrambled to process her words. Sharing a bed with an alien? It sounded absurd, yet there was a sincerity in her tone that made it impossible to refuse. I suppose that's fine, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. If it helps you feel safe. Her smile returned, warmer this time. Thank you. And just like that, the course of my life shifted. Little did I know, the decision to let Nyari into my home that night would be the start of something extraordinary, something that would challenge everything I thought I knew about myself, my world, and the very nature of love. The air in the apartment grew thick with anticipation as I led Nyari to the bedroom. The room was small and unremarkable, a double bed pressed against the wall, flanked by a simple nightstand. A single lamp cast a soft, golden glow, illuminating the muted tones of the bedding and furniture. I felt a strange twinge of embarrassment as I gestured toward the bed. It wasn't exactly luxurious, and now it would be shared with an alien whose elegance made the space feel impossibly ordinary. It is quaint, Nyari said, her melodic voice tinged with curiosity. She stepped forward, her luminous presence lighting the room in a way the lamp never could. Humans sleep here? Alone? Most of the time, yeah, I replied, leaning against the doorframe. It's not like your people, I guess. You said you don't really do intimacy? She turned to face me, her silver hair catching the light like spun moonlight. Not in the way you do. Physical closeness is rare on Listara, reserved for specific ceremonies or moments of necessity. Yet, here on Earth, I have observed humans seeking it freely, craving it even. It's not so much craving, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. It's just comforting. Being close to someone makes you feel less alone. Her eyes softened and she stepped closer, her movements deliberate yet graceful. Perhaps that is what I seek tonight. Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. My heart thudded in my chest as I struggled to find a response. Instead, I gestured awkwardly toward the bed. Well, it's all yours. I'll, grab a blanket and sleep on the couch? Nyari's brow furrowed, her expression a mixture of confusion and disappointment. The couch? I asked to sleep next to you. I blinked, caught off guard by her directness. All right. Are you sure? It might be a little weird. Her violet eyes locked onto mine, unflinching. I do not find it weird. Do you? The question was disarming, as was the earnestness in her gaze. I guess not, I admitted, though the flutter in my chest suggested otherwise. All right then. If you're okay with it, I am too. Nyari smiled, a small but genuine expression that sent a ripple of warmth through me. Thank you. I turned off the light and climbed into bed, suddenly hyper-aware of every movement and sound. Nyari followed, settling beside me with a fluid grace. The bed dipped slightly under her weight, and I felt the faint warmth of her presence as she lay down, close but not touching. For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sounds were the distant hum of the city and the soft rhythm of our breathing. My mind raced with questions, but I didn't know how to ask them without sounding foolish. She, too, seemed lost in thought, her gaze fixed on the ceiling. Finally, she broke the silence. Your heart is loud. I turned to her, startled. What? Your heartbeat, she said, her tone almost teasing. I can hear it. It is fast. Yeah, well, if this isn't exactly normal for me, I said, feeling my cheeks heat. Having an alien in my bed isn't something I ever thought would happen. She chuckled softly, the sound like a delicate chime. I suppose it is strange for both of us. Silence fell again, but this time it felt less heavy. I turned onto my side, facing her. In the faint light filtering through the curtains, I could see her eyes glinting like gemstones. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why me? Out of everyone in this district, why did you choose to come here? Her gaze shifted as though she were weighing her words. I have watched you for some time, she said finally. Not in a way that intrudes, I would never, but from afar. You seem kind, gentle. The way you interact with others, the way you carry yourself, it is rare among both your kind and mine. I wasn't sure how to respond. Compliments were one thing, but hearing such heartfelt words from an alien was something else entirely. I'm just an ordinary guy, I said eventually. Nothing special. She shook her head, her silver hair catching the dim light like a halo. You are special even if you do not see it. Kindness is its own rarity. Her words stirred something in me, a feeling I couldn't quite place. Thanks, I said, my voice quieter than I intended. That means a lot. Nyari shifted closer, her face now only inches from mine. May I ask you something in return? Sure. Why do humans value touch so much? She asked, her voice filled with genuine curiosity. I have seen your kind embrace, hold hands, even lean against one another. It seems intimate? It is, I said, my throat suddenly dry. Touch it's a way to connect. To feel close to someone without needing words. She considered this, her gaze thoughtful. Then, with a deliberate motion, she reached out and placed her hand on mine. Her skin was cool, smooth, and faintly luminous, like the surface of a pearl. The touch sent a jolt through me, and I fought to keep my breathing steady. Like this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, I managed, my voice strained. Like that? Her hand lingered on mine, her fingers brushing against my skin in a way that felt both tentative and deliberate. The silence between us grew charged, and I realized just how close we were, close enough that I could see the faint silver flecks in her violet eyes. Does this make you feel less alone? She asked. Yes, I said honestly. Does it make you feel less displaced? She smiled, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of vulnerability behind her radiant exterior. Yes. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, our hands entwined, the distance between us narrowing with each passing moment. In that stillness, something shifted, something profound and unspoken, a connection forming between two beings from entirely different worlds. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly seen. And for the first time, Nyari didn't feel so far from home. The night deepened, the city outside settling into a lull as we lay side by side in the dimly lit room. I was acutely aware of Nyari's presence next to me, the soft rise and fall of her breath, the faint glow of her skin, the warmth radiating from her proximity. It was surreal, almost dreamlike. Yet, the weight of her hands still lingered on mine, grounding me in the reality of this extraordinary moment. Do you always stay up this late? Nyari's voice broke the silence, soft and curious. Sometimes, I admitted, turning to face her. I get caught up in work and the hours just slip by. What about you? Do Seraphines sleep like humans? Her lips curved into a small smile. Not quite. Our sleep is different. We enter a meditative state, a kind of stasis where we process memories and rejuvenate. But tonight, I find myself drawn to your way of resting. Why is that? She hesitated, her violet eyes searching mine. Because it feels more connected. On Lystara, we rarely share physical spaces like this. Even with those we are close to, there is a distance, a separation. Here with you, that feels intimate. The word hung in the air, carrying a weight that made my heart pound. Intimate, I repeated softly. I guess it is. Her gaze lingered on me, her expression contemplative. Do humans often feel alone? She asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I have observed your kind, she explained, her tone gentle but probing. You surround yourselves with others, friends, family, even strangers. Yet there is often a sadness in your eyes, a longing for something more. I see it in you as well. I open my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. She wasn't wrong. Despite the bustling city, the people I interacted with daily, there was a part of me that had always felt isolated, disconnected. It was a feeling I rarely admitted, even to myself. I guess you're right, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes it feels like no matter how many people you're around, there's still this emptiness. Like something's missing. Nyari's expression softened and she reached out, her fingers brushing against mine. The touch was light, tentative, but it sent a shiver through me. That emptiness, she said, is not unique to humans. Even among my kind, there are those who feel adrift, who long for something more. Do you? I asked, my voice steady despite the flutter in my chest. Her gaze dropped, her silvery lashes casting delicate shadows over her cheeks. Yes, she admitted. That is why I came here tonight. I thought, perhaps you might understand. Her honesty was disarming, and I felt a surge of something I couldn't quite name. A mix of empathy, protectiveness, and a deep, unspoken connection. I think I do, I said, my hand turning to clasp hers fully. Her skin was cool to the touch, but the warmth in her eyes made up for it. The silence that followed was different this time, not awkward, but heavy with unspoken truths. Slowly, she shifted closer, her body a mere breath away from mine. Humans are remarkable, she said, her voice barely audible. Your capacity to feel, to connect, it is unlike anything I have known. It's not always easy, I said, my voice soft. But moments like this, they make it worth it. Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment, I thought she might say something more. Instead, she leaned in, her face so close that I could feel the faint, cool exhale of her breath. Her violet eyes locked onto mine, and time seemed to stand still. I have read about this, she murmured, her gaze dropping to my lips. The act of kissing. It is said to be a gesture of connection. My heart raced, the air between us electric. It is, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. She hesitated, her expression a mix of curiosity and vulnerability. Would you show me? The question sent a jolt through me, and for a moment, I hesitated. This wasn't just a casual kiss, it was a leap into the unknown, a crossing of boundaries between two worlds. But as I looked into her eyes, saw the sincerity and openness there, I knew I couldn't refuse. Slowly, I closed the distance between us, my hand coming up to cup her cheek. Her skin was impossibly smooth, cool like marble but with a softness that felt alive. She didn't pull away, her gaze steady and unflinching as I leaned in. When our lips met, it was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Her touch was featherlight, almost hesitant, but there was an intensity beneath it, a depth of feeling that took my breath away. Her lips were cool but warmed quickly against mine, the connection sparking something deep within me. When we finally pulled apart, her eyes searched mine, wide with wonder. That was extraordinary, she whispered. For me too, I said, my voice thick with emotion. She reached up, her fingers brushing against her lips as though trying to capture the sensation. Is this why humans kiss? Yeah, I said, unable to suppress a small smile. It's a way of saying what words can't. Her gaze softened, and she leaned in once more, resting her forehead against mine. Then let this be my way of saying, thank you. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, the world outside fading into nothingness. In that quiet, intimate moment, it didn't matter that we came from different worlds, that our lives were separated by galaxies and cultures. All that mattered was the connection we had found, the bridge we had built between two lonely hearts. And for the first time in a long time, neither of us felt alone. Morning light filtered through the curtains, painting the room in shades of gold. The warmth of sunlight on my skin stirred me from sleep, but it wasn't the only sensation that caught my attention. A cool weight pressed lightly against me. She had shifted in her sleep, her body nestled close to mine, her head resting on my shoulder. Her silvery hair spilled across the pillow like liquid moonlight, and her soft, even breaths tickled my neck. For a moment, I didn't move, afraid that any sudden motion might wake her. The peaceful expression on her face was mesmerizing, a stark contrast to the guarded curiosity she had shown the night before. I had never seen her so vulnerable, so human. As if sensing my thoughts, her eyes fluttered open. Those brilliant violet irises focused on me, and a small smile curved her lips. "Good morning," she said, her voice a gentle melody. "Morning," I replied, my voice rough from sleep. "Did you sleep well?" She tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "I do not know if what I experienced counts as sleep by your standards, but it was comforting. I have never felt so at peace." Her words sent a warm flush through me. "I'm glad." She sat up slowly, her hair cascading over her shoulders like a silken veil. Her gaze wandered around the room before settling back on me. "Do all humans wake like this? With another so near?" I chuckled, rubbing the back of my neck. "Not usually. This is, kind of a first for me." Her smile widened, a playful glint in her eyes. "Then I am honored to share the experience with you." Despite the lightheartedness of her words, there was an underlying sincerity that made my heart ache in the best way. I pushed myself up, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Are you hungry? Thirsty? I could make breakfast." "Breakfast," she repeated, the word unfamiliar on her tongue. "I have observed humans eating in the mornings. It seems elaborate." "It doesn't have to be," I said with a grin. "Let me show you." I led her to the kitchen, the apartment still bathed in the quiet stillness of early morning. She moved gracefully, her curiosity evident as she glanced at the various appliances and gadgets cluttering the counters. "What is this?" she asked, pointing to the coffee machine. "It's a coffee maker," I explained. "It brews a drink humans rely on to wake up." Her eyes sparkled with amusement. "You require sustenance to function?" "Something like that," I admitted, laughing. "It's more about habit than necessity. You'll see." As I prepared coffee and set about making a simple breakfast of eggs and toast, Nyari observed me closely, her head tilted slightly as if cataloging every movement. She asked questions about the ingredients, the process, even the utensils, her curiosity boundless. Finally, I placed a plate in front of her, along with a steaming mug of coffee. She sniffed the beverage cautiously before taking a small sip. Her eyes widened and she set the mug down quickly. "It is bitter." I laughed. "Yeah, it's an acquired taste. Some people add sugar or cream to make it sweeter." She picked up the toast next, nibbling on it tentatively. Her expression softened, and she nodded in approval. "This is pleasant. Simple but satisfying." "Sometimes simple is all you need," I said, taking a bite of my own toast. As we ate, the atmosphere between us grew more relaxed, the initial tension of the previous night replaced by an easy camaraderie. She asked more questions, about food, human culture, even mundane topics like why humans worked so many hours each day. I answered as best I could, fascinated by her genuine interest in the intricacies of my world. When breakfast was over, we sat on the couch, the sunlight streaming through the windows casting warm patterns on the floor. Nyari leaned back, her expression contemplative. "I never expected to find such comfort here," she said softly. "Your world is so different from mine, yet there is a warmth to it." "It's not perfect," I said, leaning back beside her. "But it has its moments." She turned to face me, her violet eyes shining with a mix of curiosity and something deeper. "Tell me about those moments. What brings you joy?" The question caught me off guard, but her earnestness made it impossible to dismiss. I thought for a moment before answering. "It's the little things, I guess. Watching the sun set over the city, hearing a song that takes you back to a happy memory, sharing a laugh with someone you care about, moments like that." She nodded slowly, as though committing my words to memory. "And do you often share these moments with others?" "Not as often as I'd like," I admitted. "Life gets busy, and it's easy to lose sight of what really matters." Her gaze softened, and she reached out, her fingers brushing against mine. "Perhaps you should not wait so long to share them. Connection is fleeting, even for those who live as long as my kind." Her touch sent a shiver through me, but it wasn't just the physical sensation. It was the weight of her words, the unspoken understanding between us. "You're right," I said quietly. "I guess I've been waiting for the right person." "And have you found them?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. I met her gaze, my heart pounding. The answer was clear, but the words felt too monumental to speak aloud. Instead, I reached out, taking her hand in mine. Her fingers were cool, her touch gentle but firm. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The space between us shrank, the invisible barriers of species, culture, and circumstance fading into irrelevance. She leaned in slightly, her violet eyes searching mine, and I felt a pull stronger than anything I'd ever known. "Nyari," I began, my voice trembling. A sudden chime interrupted me, the sound cutting through the moment like a knife. It was the doorbell. Her gaze darted to the door, her expression shifting to one of alertness. "Are you expecting someone?" "No," I said, standing and moving toward the door. My heart sank as I opened it to find two figures standing there. Both serene, their features as otherworldly as Nyari's, but their expressions far less welcoming. "Nyari," one of them said, their tone firm and authoritative. "We have been searching for you." Her expression hardened, and she rose to her feet. "I am not returning," she said, her voice steady but filled with defiance. The tension in the room was palpable, the serene morning shattered by their sudden intrusion. I stepped between Nyari and the strangers, my instincts screaming to protect her even as I had no idea how. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice firm despite the unease twisting in my gut. The taller of the two seraphim fixed me with a cold stare. "This matter does not concern you, human. Step aside." But as I stood my ground, Nyari moved to my side, her hand slipping into mine. "No," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "He is with me. And I am staying." The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to choke on. The two seraphim standing in my doorway were as imposing as they were otherworldly. Their tall, elegant forms shimmered faintly in the morning light, and their expressions were unreadable, cool and distant, like carved marble. Yet, beneath their composed demeanor, I could sense their displeasure, their authority pressing against the air like a physical force. Nyari's grip on my hand tightened. Despite her calm exterior, I could feel the subtle tremor in her fingers. She stepped forward, placing herself slightly in front of me, her chin raised defiantly. "Leave us," she said, her voice firm but calm. "I have no intention of returning." The taller of the two seraphim, the one who had spoken before, arched a pale, silver eyebrow. "Nyari," they said, their voice smooth yet laced with reproach, "you know this is not permissible. Your actions are reckless, unfitting of one with your standing." "I no longer care about my standing," she shot back, her tone sharper now. "You would bind me to a life devoid of meaning, dictated by laws that deny me the very connections I seek. Here, I have found something real, something worth fighting for." Their gaze flicked to me, cold and assessing. "This human," they said, disdain dripping from their words. "A fleeting creature of a primitive world? You would forsake your people for this?" I bristled at the insult but held my tongue, sensing that this wasn't my moment to speak. Nyari, however, was unfazed. "Yes," she said simply. "Because he understands me in ways you never could. He sees me not as a symbol or a duty but as a person. That is something your traditions will never offer." The shorter of the two seraphim stepped forward, their expressions softening slightly. "Nyari, please," they said, their voice quieter, almost pleading. "This world cannot sustain you. The bonds you form here are temporary at best. You will outlive them all, and the pain of loss will consume you. Come back with us and you will be safe." Nyari hesitated, the words clearly striking a chord. I could see the conflict flicker in her eyes, a shadow of doubt crossing her face. Instinctively, I stepped closer, my hands still clasping hers. "She doesn't need safety," I said, my voice steady despite the anxiety churning in my chest. "She needs freedom. She needs the chance to choose her own path, even if it's not the one you want for her." The taller seraphim's gaze sharpened, their irritation now palpable. And you believe you can offer her this freedom? You, who cannot comprehend the vastness of her existence? I met their gaze, refusing to be cowed. I don't claim to understand everything about her or her people. But I know what it's like to feel alone, to want something more out of life. And I know that what we've found together is real, no matter how different we are. The shorter Seraphine glanced at Nyari, their expression pained. Think carefully, Nyari, they said softly. This choice cannot be undone. Nyari turned to me, her violet eyes meeting mine. In that moment, it felt as though the rest of the world had fallen away. Her expression was unreadable, her gaze searching mine as if looking for an answer to a question she couldn't ask. I cannot promise that this will be easy, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. But if you are willing, I choose this. I choose you. My heart swelled, the weight of her words settling over me like a warm embrace. I'm with you, I said, my voice firm. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Nyari turned back to the Seraphine, her resolve hardening. You have my answer, she said. I will not return. The taller Seraphine's expression darkened, their luminous aura flaring slightly. So be it, they said coldly. But understand this, Nyari, you are now severed from the collective. You are alone in this choice. I am not alone, she replied, her voice steady. Not anymore. Without another word, the Seraphine turned and left, their forms dissolving into shimmering light as they stepped beyond the threshold. The air in the room seemed to grow lighter, the oppressive weight of their presence lifting. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Are you okay? I asked, turning to Nyari. She nodded, though her expression was tinged with sadness. I knew this would happen, she said softly. To choose this life is to forsake all I have known. But it is worth it. I reached out, cupping her cheek gently. You're not alone. Not as long as I'm here. Her gaze softened, and she leaned into my touch. Thank you, she said, her voice barely audible. For standing by me. We stayed like that for a moment, the silence between us filled with unspoken understanding. Then, as if to break the heaviness of the moment, I gave her a small smile. So, what now? A flicker of amusement crossed her face. Now, she said, her voice lightening, you show me more of this world you call home. I chuckled, the weight of the morning's events momentarily forgotten. All right, I said. But first, we're going to need more coffee. She laughed, a sound so pure and genuine that it made my heart soar. Together, we stepped into the day, the challenges ahead looming but no longer insurmountable. For the first time, it felt like the future wasn't something to fear. It was something to build, together. Months passed, and life settled into a rhythm that was both ordinary and extraordinary. Nyari adapted quickly to life on Earth, her sharp mind and innate curiosity helping her navigate the complexities of human existence. She immersed herself in everything my world had to offer: books, music, art, even the chaos of city life. Watching her discover the beauty and quirks of humanity was like seeing the world anew through her eyes. Our connection deepened with every passing day. We shared quiet moments, late-night talks under the stars, laughter over meals she insisted on helping to prepare, though her culinary experiments often ended in hilarity, and walks through the bustling streets where her presence always seemed to draw curious, admiring glances. For every question she asked about my world, I found myself just as eager to learn about hers. Though she was no longer connected to her people, the stories she shared painted vivid pictures of the life she'd left behind. In those moments, I understood the depth of her sacrifice and was determined to ensure she never regretted it. But not everything was perfect. There were challenges, moments when the weight of her severance from the collective pressed heavily on her, and times when I questioned whether I could truly provide what she needed. Yet through it all, we found strength in each other. Our differences, instead of dividing us, became the threads that wove our lives together into something uniquely ours. One evening, as we sat on the rooftop of my apartment building, the city sprawled below us like a sea of twinkling lights. Nyari turned to me with a question that had lingered in her eyes for days. Do you ever wonder what the future holds? She asked, her voice soft, almost tentative. I took a moment to consider her question, my gaze drifting to the stars above. They were the same stars she had gazed upon from her distant home, the same stars that had witnessed her journey across galaxies to this moment. Sometimes, I admitted, but I've learned that it's not about knowing what's ahead, it's about being present, about making each moment count. She smiled, her violet eyes reflecting the starlight. A wise sentiment, she said. Perhaps that is why I chose this path. Not for certainty, but for possibility. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. Her touch, cool and steady, was a constant reminder of the remarkable being who had entered my life so unexpectedly. As long as we're together, I said, we'll face whatever comes. One step at a time. She leaned her head against my shoulder, her silver hair brushing against my cheek. I never imagined that my search for connection would lead me here, she said quietly. To you. Your world may be imperfect, but it has shown me a depth of feeling, of belonging, that I never thought possible. And you've shown me what it means to truly open my heart, I replied, my voice steady despite the emotions welling up inside me. To take risks, to embrace the unknown. You've changed my life, Nyari. She tilted her head up to look at me, her expression soft but filled with a quiet intensity. As you have changed mine. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of unspoken words, shared emotions, and a sense of unity that transcended words. I wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer as we gazed out at the city and the vast sky beyond. In that moment, under the same stars that had guided her to Earth, I realized something profound. Love wasn't bound by species, by worlds, or even by time. It was a force that defied logic, that bridged gaps thought impossible, that found its way to those willing to embrace it. The future was uncertain, as it always would be. But as we sat there, entwined in each other's presence, I knew one thing for sure, we weren't alone anymore. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, two hearts united under the same stars. And that was all that mattered.